revenues at the top, your expenses at the bottom. If we look at the next column, we're looking at potential mid-year changes. So if you notice up in our revenues, in Cassell, which is our accounting system, we actually included the amounts that we were anticipating getting for the summit tap fees, the one-time revenues. However, it wasn't in your resolution that you passed. So we've actually taken those back out of Cassell, so they're not in there. So they would be a mid-year adjustment. We would add those revenues back in if we got them. Then the other thing that we're going to include in the mid-year adjustments, we anticipate having a few more expenditures for the URA for attorney fees. So we're going to move another $15,000 in from the general fund. And we also have the refunding that's going to be in there. So that's what those mid-year modifications are. So what that gives you is a revised 2019 appropriation for your budget. So if you notice on the next column over in column E, you're going to see either a negative or a positive. This is what's going to impact your fund balance. So if it's a negative, it's going to draw your fund balance down, and if it's a positive, it's going to push it back up. So when we look at the next column, that's the 2018 audited financial statements, that's our ending fund balance. The next column is going to be any kind of restrictions that we have on that fund balance, because although we have lots of money in there, we can't spend it all because some of it is, number one, not spendable if it's inventory or assets. And the other thing is maybe there's a restriction on it for something. Debt service is one of the things that restricts that. And so the ending column has our estimated ending fund balance or net position of where we're going to start for the 2020 budget. Any questions or concerns on that? Okay.
Okay. That's what we're recording it. Do I need to have my mic on?
Oh, sure. It'd be helpful.
I was curious when you included with the, I need a piece of paper, but, yeah, I use this. On the, so I just wanted to verify that the electric and the water and the wastewater, so the differences were, it looks compared to what we budgeted to compared to where we are in 2019 currently, there's some increases, and that's because of the changes that we passed last year of increasing the charges.
So if you're looking at specific line items, potentially. So we did have a rate increase in the wastewater fund. But when you look at the mid-year modifications, what that is that's when we get the money from Summit for the tap fees and the investment fee for the electric.
Okay.
That's what those are.
That's what
We've been reporting these to you guys over the past several months, but they aren't actually included in what you guys passed in your resolution. So they needed to come out because your resolution didn't match what we have in the accounting system.
Now I'm following you. Thank you.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. So this is kind of where we're going to start. I also want to just kind of make a note. Whenever you put in one-time revenues, you'll notice in our budgeted increase, decrease, some of these are positive only because we have those one-time revenues. Otherwise, you guys are consistently budgeting, or at least for this year, all of the funds were budgeted to have use of fund balance. Okay? So just be aware of that, because as you continue to use your fund balance, of course, it's finite. It doesn't grow on trees. So eventually it depletes it. So just be aware of that. And I mean, we use it and we put more money back into it each year as we have more revenue and less expense. So just be aware. Okay, concerns or anything else regarding that? Okay, next thing I kind of wanted to talk about a little bit is, because I'm new to you guys and you guys are new to me, and we've got some new people on the trustee board, I just wanted to talk a little bit about terminology. So As most of you guys have a business, you know that your budget in your business is basically what you have in the bank. If you don't have any money in the bank, you can't spend anything. And of course, government is different in that your budget is actually a legal appropriation. It's the amount that you guys are telling staff that we can spend in a year. So we cannot exceed that by law. That's a state statute. Your appropriation is the authority to spend. Fund balance and net position, you'll hear that quite a bit. Fund balance is a governmental term for government funds like the general fund. Net position is going to be for your enterprise or proprietary funds. So it's going to be your utilities. It's the same thing. It's basically assets less liabilities equal your fund balance or net position. Also in that, if you have on your revenues and expenses, as you have more revenue and less expense, then you're going to add to that fund balance or net position. If it's the other way, then it's going to take away from that. Okay. I do want to talk a little bit about the wastewater fund. In the information I sent you guys, the audited financial statements actually combine the water and wastewater. And when you guys did that back in 2013, you had a resolution that combined them. Perfect. Except we appropriate for them separately and we account for them separately. So what I needed to figure out is where is that fund at? Because I couldn't tell from the audited financial statement. So I actually broke them apart and I sent that to you guys as well. So you can kind of see the health of that fund. And it's totally understandable why they're combined. I'd like to actually combine those in the accounting system, and I'd like to appropriate for them together. And the reason for that is, again, budget law says that you cannot appropriate money if there isn't any money there. And if we look at that fund, there's no money there. So I'd like to combine those so that we can go ahead and do it that way.
So Joe, are you suggesting that we, as we go into the 2020 budget, that we would merge those in effect?
Yes.
So that they're both reflective of the way it's audited?
Yes.
And it gives us a little more flexibility in terms of how funds can be.
It does. In fact, you can use the combined resources then for both the water and the wastewater. We can still go ahead and report those to you separately. So you can still see the revenue and expense for the water fund and the revenue and expense for the wastewater, but you have the combined resources available to both of them. How you guys have seen it in the past for budgeting is we've taken a 50-50 split where we just said, this is what the balance is for the statements, for the audited financial statements. We split it in half, and that's how we did it. And that's not really reflective of what we're looking at this point. Does that make sense? Concerns?
Trustee Robert?
Can we just briefly review the motivation for combining the two funds and what is wrong with that? Is it a legal issue or?
So the motivation, from what I understand from reading the resolution, I wasn't here in 2013, but it was my understanding that the health of the fund, even at that time, was not stellar. And so what they wanted to do, or what the people at the time wanted to do, was to borrow money. And in order to borrow money, the combined fund of the water and wastewater presented a much better picture for borrowing. Yes.
It was, after the flood, the sanitation fund we knew was going to have tremendous expenses. We had applied for a loan for the wastewater plant. It hadn't been granted yet. We needed just operating capital. And so they combined them. And as Jill said, the intent was always to track operational expenses separately, so we still knew what it cost to run the plant versus the water system. But what she's saying is, technically, when we passed that resolution, it should have only been, it should have been allocated as one fund, and it wasn't. When we passed that resolution to adopt the budget.
Should have
It
been
still said water and
appropriated.
sewer, and it should have been together. So she wants to combine them on paper, legally, but she still can present to us every month the actual operating status of each of the enterprises. So we know how much the sanitation fund is really costing us to operate. But legally, we can't operate it in the red.
So are we moving away from the status that we were, the goal was to put us in a better position for borrowing? Is this, was that something we weren't supposed to do, or is it?
Oh, no, you can borrow from another enterprise.
No, I mean borrowing for, like, taking a loan, or it was just a substitute for taking a loan. Okay,
Well, we applied for one, but it hadn't
I
been
see.
authorized yet.
Right.
Wouldn't it be collateral? It became the collateral for the wastewater.
It did,
Okay.
Potential revenue for the funds.
yes.
So we didn't really need to combine in the first place because we could transfer from one proprietary fund to the other anyway, or?
We knew it wasn't a short-term deal. We knew it was going to be several years.
Okay, thank you.
I just want to make sure that's going to work out for you, Aaron, having it separated how you like water.
Because you guys will still do the report, like the quarterly report will come the same way. So I thought that should be fine. It sounds like it's more just to make it official in the
Yeah.
Casell system, whereas not now, and
Okay.
we'd still see the same thing. Because, otherwise the one concern would be, it looks like we're doing okay, and you don't see how bad the wastewater really is, and that we need to raise the rate still for wastewater, not.
So I just want to make sure we keep it as easy as possible for you and your board
Yeah.
as you go over the numbers. So what we have to do for us, you have to do great. But if we have to split it out, that's good for you.
Yeah.
Right, good. Thanks.
Okay,
Also for purposes of the public, because we're probably going to be asking the public to pay, or requiring the public, I guess, not asking them to pay higher wastewater rates. So whatever report we're getting of showing why the wastewater system has been, wastewater fund has been in the red, will be in the publicly available reports. It'll be in the packets that go out that anybody from the public can see, right? Because
so once we combine the funds,
Yeah.
you won't see the balance sheet side anymore because you're using the combined resources of both funds to pay for the expenses of it. You will see the revenue and expense, but you will not see, like what I did when I split everything apart, and it was really clear, this is the wastewater and it was in the red.
Yeah.
And this is the water fund and it was doing very well. So, I mean, that was very clear. When we combine them, you'll lose that visibility on the balance sheet side.
but you'll still see the operational
Yes.
revenue and expense,
That is correct.
and it'll be in a form available to the public.
It would be in the same form that we presented this
Okay.
time. It'll just be combined into one fund instead of two.
And you can always core the town's books. I mean, theirs are available to anybody.
And that's something the auditors have no problem with as well.
The auditors should not have any problem with it because on the financial side, financial reporting side, we report them together. So our financial audit shows them reported together. Okay? Cool. Okay, so the next part is I'm looking for feedback from you guys. I put a couple of questions that are in the talking points, and I'd like to take some notes and get your ideas and what you would like to see for 2020. What is your vision for 2020?
Rainbows, unicorns.
Well, that would be awesome.
Could I go backwards for a second? It may relate to
Of course.
some of the talking points, something like this, because I was still getting my computer called up. Going back to, there was a projected, a budgeted decrease in fund balances, and the one for the general revenue fund was a decrease of 131,019. At this point, since we're, I guess, early August, that's what's budgeted, but a lot of, really most years that I've seen when we budget something like that, there are certain categories of budgeted expenses that we don't expend 100%. And some years, we get lucky with unanticipated revenues, like last year, the interest earnings, investment earnings were much more than we thought, so we got a little bonus there. And sometimes we try to conservatively estimate our tax revenues, and sometimes the sales tax plus the property tax is more. So sitting here at the beginning of month 8, does it look like that our actual decrease or increase in the general fund balance will be around 131,000 or something more or less than that? Any idea?
I do, actually. Right now, where we sit and the way that our sales taxes come in, we're actually showing less revenue than where we should be at this time. So our revenues are a little bit low. I would expect to see those go up later in the summer as we're kind of getting more of our revenue in. Our expenditures are a little bit higher than what is budgeted. So, but I think that we should, I didn't make any changes to that.
Right.
Because I anticipate that our revenues will actually come in fairly close and our expenditures will kind of level out. Just recognize though too, budgeting is, it's all an estimate.
Sure.
So, and we make our best guess based on the information that we have at the time.
And building on that and answering the question you asked just a minute ago, one thing that I would hope is that we do budgeting in a way other than dividing by 12. What is your plan for?
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. That was awesome lead-in. So actually, in the talking points, that is something we are looking at doing. So Cassell does have the ability to budget by month. Some expenses, of course, are pretty level throughout the year. So your salaries and that kind of thing are going to be pretty level. We will have summertime staffing that goes up. But our revenues definitely come in at different times, and we can actually do a 3-year monthly amount and then kind of get a percentage so that we can budget those correctly. We are looking at doing that on a monthly basis, which will give you guys a better view of where we're at.
So would that also include having the large payout amounts for paying loans and so forth would be in the month in which they're anticipated to be paid?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So then when we're looking at a report, we would be getting pretty close to an understanding of where we were at that point in the year.
Yes, sir.
Good.
So I actually have a couple of questions. Unfortunately, I wasn't, and you might not have been either, in May. I think that you all had sat down and done a workshop of kind of what the vision might be of things that we wanted to do for 2020. Are there any notes from that? Because unfortunately, I missed it.
What we did was, we discussed the legislative priorities to the end of the term. We
Okay.
didn't set it for 2020.
Nothing for 2020 from
Not
a,
necessarily. I mean, we
like a
just-
general priority
We just
of.
more confirmed what people wanted to get accomplished during this term yet.
Okay. Well, that's good
We
to
can
know.
still
'cause,
send you them.
That'd be great, but I was just thinking if that was a part of the conversation,
We
that
should use
could-
that as our driving force.
Right,
Sure,
exactly.
absolutely.
But
I'll
so-
send it to both you and Jill and Jim, so that we can use that as a guiding document,
Okay, and
at
perhaps,
least for the,
would you like it to?
I'll send it to everyone.
Okay, that'd be great.
But as a guiding document for the first, quarter at least.
Okay. And then I was curious before we start also, are there items that we budgeted for 2018 or, that did not, well, are we budgeted for 2019 that did not get spent that we did not purchase? For example, when I was kind of looking back at 2018, I saw a note, did we ever purchase speed bumps? And so did that get rolled over into 2019 or did they get purchased? Or are there things that are outstanding that we need to reconsider, I guess?
That is a great question. So we actually don't have a policy, I don't believe, where we actually roll over our leftover budget for capital purchases. So basically, if you don't purchase it at the end of the year, it goes back into the big bucket and then it gets reappropriated. There isn't a carryover provision that we have that I am aware of.
I think what you're asking is, can we cross off the list that it took this purchase?
Right, or was there something genuinely left that we didn't get to that we were planning on as a capital purchase, therefore
Use the electric meters.
Yeah, the meters are the big
Okay.
ones. They've been carried
So-
over
we need
3
to
years.
make sure that we are reconsidering that for 2020 budget if we're not going to get it done this year.
Oh, we're gonna get it done.
Okay,
Not this year, but.
but I was just kind of curious, and I was using the speed bumps as an example because I don't remember them actually getting purchased.
And actually, the speed bumps are in our capital budget for this year.
It's
There's
this year.
6
They were
speed
carried
bumps that are in the budget for this year.
Okay, okay.
Okay?
So I just didn't know if there's any of those kinds of things, and thank you for thinking of the meters.
And if we don't get to it in that year, then it goes back into the big bucket, like I said, and it gets reappropriated. But each department head comes back to finance and to the board and to Victoria with, these are the things that we need to do. So if they didn't get them done in one year, then hopefully, if it was still a priority, they would again ask for it the next year and we would reappropriate it.
So that leads to another request, I guess, which would be to revisit the capital improvement plans
For 2019.
in aggregate, both capital improvement that are being grant funded and the ones that we need to do because we need to do them, not necessarily through grants. And to prioritize those, again, into at least into next year, maybe even over a couple of years.
That's a great idea. I'd actually like to do a 5-year plan. And we had talked a little bit about, we have a different CIP plan for each, there's one for streets, there's one for utilities. I mean, so we have many different ones. And I would agree, I'd like to see a consolidated one where we can take everything and prioritize it, just like what you're talking about, and then look at it over a 5-year plan. Okay.
Any questions?
So were there programs that you guys liked that worked really well over the course of the last year that you'd like to see continue into 2020 or improve or be more frequent, or what would you guys like to see?
Or to put on the list to discuss later.
Trustee Bynum?
Fairly minor, but I thought that the curbside limb pickup was pretty popular and went well. There was more there than we anticipated. We couldn't do 2. We only ended up only doing 1, but and we may need to tweak the requirements for that, as I think Victoria's already suggested, so you don't have
10 acres.
big commercial haulers bringing things to be picked up because it happens to be in town. But I'd like to see that continue and maybe, change, limit it mostly to residential, reasonable limits so that we're not taking the place of commercial haulers for businesses.
And I think we only did that once this year, right? We're going
Right.
to do it
We have
twice?
one this fall yet.
Okay.
Oh, we're still going to do another one? I thought the money wasn't there.
Well, the money is not, well, it depends where things land in that fund. We can come back to you if there's enough left and do it maybe in November, October, November. Yeah. I haven't written it off all the way
Okay, another program that went, I think, extremely well was the move to online camping and the park, the mobile vehicles and so forth. That seems to have gone well and has produced some good revenue for the town. So I'm just wondering if there are ways of looking at other sort of labor-saving efforts that might cut down on staff time devoted, particularly if it can help with revenue.
Okay.
I'm not sure what those would be, but it's just, that one seems to have done so well that, that if there are other opportunities like that.
So You talked about camping, just a question for you. So you talked about camping. I know we have camping at Laverne Johnson Park. Would you be interested in looking at other parks to have camping at as well?
I would almost think that might be a subject in a workshop.
Okay.
For discussion. I think we'd want to know, like, how to frame that question effectively. There may be some limitations, and I hate to kind of go out on a limb and then find out the limb won't hold you.
Nope, that's totally fair. Okay.
Just.
So I sat down and just listed out 4 or 5 different things that came to the top of my mind sort of quickly. And of course, that doesn't mean that that is the priority per se. I think, though, that the improvements at the wastewater treatment plant, I think we really need to be considerate of that, and find a way to make sure that we're setting enough money so that for the situation that, you're going to report in your admin report this evening, is we can deal with it. But I'm also, out of the auditor's report, what really kind of struck me was the clawback from the state and then FEMA. And I guess that kind of really sort of, I don't know, kind of gave me anxiety and feel like make sure that we really are being perhaps even more aggressive as to setting funding aside for that. And to me, that seems like a big priority. And then we had the conversation about the conservation fund, and your recommendation was that money actually does need to be spent and needs to go to park infrastructure or things along that line. So coming up with perhaps what could we prioritize the $200,000 for? And then the road repair is also, I think, huge. And I think people are exhausted with the condition of our roads in the neighborhoods. So those were my, off the top of my head, quick big ones.
Trustee Browning.
Yeah, I've got a big one that, having gone from curbside limb collection to a big one, that if this were the Spanish Inquisition, I'd probably have to be worried about heresy. But for several months, including at our last URA meeting, and seeing the mid-year adjustment made for the URA expenditures, the big picture that relates back to the past and goes into the future to me is, what are the chances of the town ever recovering the annual transfers that we have made in the last 3 or 4 years and plan to make this year and next year to the URA? How are we ever going to get our money back? Or should that be basically regarded as money that's gone forever? And that may be a question that needs answering more on the URA projections than the town projections. But it just seems to me, big picture, long term, what's the purpose of a town forming and supporting a URA? I think in the long run, it's that it produces, either renovates existing, blight that we have, which we certainly do have some, or spurs future development that wouldn't occur without the URA. And the net result over the 25 years or so of the whole URA tax increment system is that in the end, the tax revenue the town gets from the new developments or from renovating blighted properties, not only does the town break even, but it supports, it enhances the town's financial picture. And indeed, if the report we did on the LPPA report singles that out, and outside consultants even focused in on that and said, basically, the town's going to be in financial distress long term because it's reached build out. We're not having the same type of new construction revenue that we had in the past, unless we can get significant tax revenue out of the URA, and in particular the eastern corridor portion of the URA. But what I see year to year is 15,000 here, 20,000 there, maybe 25,000. I'm not sure of the exact figure for last year going into the URA. Very little coming back. And then I sit through your URA meeting and I see the first negotiation with one of the other jurisdictions being that out of the tax increment financing, basically the school district's going to keep 55% of the incremental value and the town's going to get 45, I mean the URA is going to get 45%. If you project something like that on the other taxing jurisdictions, how does the town ever get its money back, much less make money in the future? The only way that I know in theory is that we generate a lot of sales tax out there someday. But then I hear Boulder County hand around about, well, one of their conditions for agreeing to their part of the URA may be some priorities that might include, affordable housing out there, which is a great idea. I'm in favor of it, but you don't get any sales tax revenue from it. And then in general, you have the situation nationwide, not just in the town of Lyons, that brick and mortar retail is not doing so well these days. So I keep questioning in my mind, how do we ever get our money back? And is it worth the 15 to 25,000 that we put in every year that we transfer from general revenue to the URA? What's the payback? And I don't have the answer to that, but I think it's a question that needs to be asked and not accepted as a matter of faith that, well, all this money we're putting into the URA each year, we're eventually going to get back. I don't know how we're going to get it back.
So actually, we'll develop a plan. This is something that we had talked about with the attorney with the URA, and that would be that all this money that we are lending from the general fund is a loan. It's not a given. So as we give money to them, we are setting up an advance, and so that they will go ahead and repay that once the URA is established and creating money. It's not creating a whole lot of money at this time, but the future projection is very rosy.
And one of the other things is depending on the mix of the types of businesses on the Eastern Corridor, even if it's not straight retail like we're used to, because that is struggling on Main Street, the more people that live here or work here will still generate sales tax at restaurants and businesses, even if it's not there. But if you add 60 people or 100 people, they to our community, they overall will be buying gas here and just increasing sales tax for other businesses, even if it's not on site there. That's kind of the theory behind that.
Yeah, and so if you're going to go on that theory, then you would try to come up with a per capita contribution of each local resident to annual local tax revenue.
And I believe that was done in that initial study.
Yeah, but then you would take out the property tax revenue they contribute, because that's all going to stay in the URA probably for the town's portion of the property tax. So you'd have to break it down further to how much sales tax would we really expect to get each year from 60 residents living on the outskirts of town?
Sure. No, I mean, it's all legitimate.
Yeah.
The, Mr. Tamburello is he has not been involved with an urban renewal authority before, or a TIF district. He has, other developers who have, so he's visiting with them. But he is starting to now put pencil and pen to paper and trying to figure out how it all works as well. He was pretty excited about it. And, looking at the initial numbers that were possible to generate out there. So again, the whole theory behind the TIF is that at some point when that ends, then it becomes kind of a windfall to the town. But, he also realizes that the Eastern Corridor is a very big area. He's only taking, relatively for us.
80 acres.
But he's only taking 6 of it. So he's probably not going to come in and ask for 100% of the TIF for that. That'll all be negotiated with URA, with the board, what percentage will go to him. So as it's developing, we will still get some of that. And it doesn't have to be 25 years. You could even say, okay, you keep 100% for for the first 5, and then we're going to go to 50% for the next 15, or, I mean, however, it's all negotiated, but he is just starting to putting down numbers on that too, so we'll have another view of
And
that soon.
my point is just that I think we need to look each year or
Sure.
carefully at those numbers and see if it really does, under a realistic projection. If we're really going to get this, I know it's technically a loan, but there's a lot of loans that are never paid back because borrowers end up without the funds to pay them back. And I just, nobody showed me yet how it works. I'll just put it that way.
So-
How the town ever gets its money back and ultimately makes.
So here's the other part of that. The costs are really upfront to get the formation of the district, and so this should be our last year of that. If you look at the expenses, it's pretty much all just legal fees.
Consultant
So-
fees.
Once we are through that, I have no problem with starting to get a loan, to take on some of those meetings. She's been, or running the meeting even. She could join us by phone and not be charging us 2 hours to drive up here. There's ways we can start saving there. It's really just top-heavy, I think, through this year.
I do like the idea of developing a budget, if you will, or a plan, financial plan over time. So that, for example, my guesstimate, based on just a couple of calculations, is that over a 20-year period, those 60 people would likely produce somewhere in the neighborhood of $100,000 to $125,000 in additional taxes to the town. And so, that's the kind of thing I think, to Trustee Browning's point, that if we had some reasonable estimates like that, it could help with both our understanding and our communication with residents relative to the value or lack of value of the URA moving forward.
Well, you sort of answered. I was going to say, I suppose within the next year or so, we're going to have a much better idea of what we might expect in Eastern Corridor based on what Mr. Tamburello decides to do, and perhaps the entities that have recently purchased other properties out there. But this is the first time in 10 or 12 years that anybody's really got some traction in doing something in the properties there. We would reasonably expect that some development would occur without URA involvement, and will anyway, probably. And we also expect that of the number, how many, 80 acres you guys just identified, a lot of it's going to stay like it is too. But I guess it feels better to know that you predict we're not going to be spending money at this rate ongoing. And I agree with Trustee Mayor Pro Tem Drystad, that it would be good to have some, I guess, documentation of what we should expect to spend ongoing. And of course, as you indicate.
And we did, Attorney Quander said that she would be putting together some projections for us from her perspective of what she thinks it will take for her firm anyway to finish up their work. And then it would be just whatever we're doing locally.
We could always put the brakes on it if we
Absolutely.
decided that, but if the spending's already done, it doesn't really matter, right?
Yeah.
Thank you.
And she did reiterate, it's not uncommon that the first payback of a TIF goes directly back to whoever started up those funds, so, help the fund start. So we would be the top priority one to reimburse. Other vision, ideas?
Small one for me, then the big one. Small one first, I think I brought this up last year and we didn't seem to go anywhere with it, because there's a pretty large, now, there's a good amount of money sitting in a non-interest bearing account with our parking meter money. I saw that in your last report, in our last meeting. And I'd asked last year in the budget process if we can keep that number low and roll that money out. I can't remember the response, why we don't get it out of there sooner.
We've already done that.
Have
That's a
we?
great question. You guys are asking really great questions.
The last board meeting, it was like sitting at $68,000, $58,000.
We
right? So you rolled it out already?
So we have
Okay.
not rolled it out yet. What we did is we talked to the bank. We're going to make that a sweep account. So
Oh,
it'll
awesome.
sweep into our general account every night. So it won't sit there anymore.
Any days.
We will move it out.
Perfect, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Okay, the bigger one, kind of like Trustee Browning did. CIP, CIP, CIP. ARPA on that for 2 years. I know the flood has put us way behind schedule. Pro Tem brought up very eloquently indicated. My concern is, as we have staff time not devoted to a lot of it right now because there's so much other stuff going on, as our infrastructure is slowly crumbling and needs to be repaired, I'm afraid at some point we're gonna hit a point that if we have two major unplanned catastrophes with a couple systems, and we're still playing way catch-up, that's gonna deplete us, and it's gonna really set us back. And with all this talk of affordable living, people need to be able to afford living, we're gonna drive up the cost of living here substantially to keep those systems operational. So, I'm a little, I would like to see maybe monies going to all the other, the different commissions even brought down or looked at bringing it down some over the next several years. Because I'm afraid that if you have a town that we have to drastically raise the cost of living here just to completely rebuild major parts of our infrastructure, and we have the flood catch-up that we've been, dealing with, I would hate to hit that point. Just seeing some of the things around, seeing the photographs that Mr. Blankenship, all his work he did, showing me where some of our lines look like, some of the stuff that Mr. Cabala was showing me. I've got some serious concerns, and I really don't want to spend, after our flood recovery is done, I don't want to see staff spending 2 or 3 years playing catch up on just getting things. I'd like to see staff spending time now if possible, but I know you guys are overworked as it is. And I think from this point forward, we're going to lose grant staff for flood recovery. And so I think there'll be some transfer of duties that's going to put more strain on our staff. But I'm just concerned about the infrastructure. Some of those areas of town that are pretty bad and depleting and getting worse.
May I respond, Mayor Pro Tem? Our new engineering firm, Murray Smith, is, we had set aside some professional fees for the CIP, so we are getting started on that now. We have to go out, we have to do the RFP and all of those things, so it takes a little bit. But we are going to have all of the streets and storm systems and water and sewer put into one report so that they can, so that we have a really good long-term plan. You know, if the water and sewer under a street is about to fail, guess what? That street's going to take a priority over one that it's just the street that's in trouble. So putting all that together into a major plan, and then as well as how to finance that plan, and that's going to be the biggest
That's my
piece.
concern, is the
Yeah,
finances,
but we're gonna-
especially what Trustee Farrell had indicated, losing the money we had already set back for the last 3 years with the state's clawback that
Sure,
we kind
sure.
of more
No,
talked about
this-
the feds, so.
This is really where the rubber is going to hit
Yeah.
the road after a disaster like this. So it is very much probably my major concern as well. And I think the first step is to get this, get a comprehensive capital improvement plan in place instead of per fund, and start looking at this more holistically, and then coming up with what does that look like? Does it look like certificates of participation, or does it look like bonds, or does it look like we might have to have an area there's a special district? You know, but part of that plan is also coming up with those resources. So we hope to have that here. And I think he said in the next 6.
Yeah, I was thinking this fall.
Yeah, this fall, by by budget year, by the end of, before we're done closing up the
That'd be
budget. So that is on our list as well,
Thank you.
high priority. Yes. But it may mean you know, some of these things that we sometimes get pressure from one or two people, you know,
And I'm thinking the two on my left or right with their commissions, they do a lot of work, and
Yeah.
we do a lot of work with the arts and the humanities.
yeah.
But at some point, we may have to, because we're helping with people with leave. Oh, I'm sorry. But we raise the cost of living so much to replace,
Yep.
you know, 2 miles of sewer line, some water line, some major streets, some electrical. We just raise costs, we're gonna increase the numbers that need help from leave. And that's not, that's going backwards in my way of saying things. So that's.
No, it's going to be a pretty complex puzzle to put together here, but it is on our top of our list to start tackling that one.
Trustee Brown.
Yeah, I would really like to see more traffic signals, pedestrian signals in the budget, judging from how well the one has worked. I think that people are actually stopping now for people trying to cross, and the fact that there are so many cars going through here every day, all the time, and many more people walking around town, I think it's going to be more and more necessary to have those pedestrian flashing lights at every crosswalk, like Boulder, really, unfortunately, like Boulder. But I think that's gotta be a priority for the safety. I've seen so many close calls on areas that don't have those now. I also, I am curious as to what, if they ever did get the movable speed bumps, because I thought they were ordered like 3 years ago, and I've never seen them used. So I think that those would be a good mitigation factor on a lot of the side streets that we have racing people down the roads.
Okay.
So any sort of like traffic mitigation, pedestrian safety sort of things, I think it should be a high priority.
Okay.
I like the new flashing school sign, 15 miles an hour, that just got put up. I think that's going to be handy. But that's pretty much it. Oh, and the Fifth Avenue sewer line that needs to be fixed within the next 5 years, I think was the deal. I think we need to start putting a little bit of money away for that each year, kind of like we've been doing for the meters, because that's going to be a fairly large capital improvement project, like the Longs Peak deal. So
Okay.
we could just start stashing some money away for that. That would be lovely.
Great. Thank you. Anything else?
I had made a note that I don't remember exactly where I saw in water fund, a land purchase budget item, 152,000. It seemed to show up in a couple of places too. What's that about?
So actually, that wasn't a land purchase. We actually purchased the land back in 2017. That was the land that we put the Public Works buildings on.
Oh, okay.
It's sitting in the wrong spot. So instead of it being a capital purchase, it should have been debt service.
Okay.
That's what that is. And I believe it's sitting in both funds, the water and the sewer fund. Again, when we combine those, that'll kind of all,
Okay.
It's also supposed to be paid back, it's just a loan, really, right? The water, wastewater is supposed to get the 300,000 or whatever back when we finally get the tap fees from the Eastern Corridor.
right.
And to back up about, you asked about what programs seem to be working well, we'd like to see continued. I guess it just occurred to me that the contractors that providing security in the parks on the weekends, it seemed, it's a very positive thing, and from what I can tell.
Is that Trivent?
Trident,
Trident?
yes. But I think we all pretty much agree. We were talking about fundamentals, taking care of maintenance and disaster recovery, and I very much appreciate what seems to be renewed efforts in documenting very clearly what our spending requirements are, so that it's easier for people to understand, and the more we could present to residents what that is in a way that they can more easily consume, all the better.
I have a couple of,
Go ahead.
no, you go ahead.
No, you go ahead. No, I'm just- How could I forget my usual since I've been up here?
Mine's jotted down, so I'm.
Make sure Dave Cosgrove has numbers I always ask for every year on maintenance compared to what the estimated costs were from the engineers,
Yep.
the architects in our parks. So I want to make sure we are staying there. It's new to you, but
It is new to me.
yeah, as soon as you tell him it came from me, he'll just start laughing. So I'm always on him about that. I just want to make sure where our expenses are on upkeeps and cost of maintenance, because the first couple of years, you still have a lot, even though something's brand new, but then as more wear and tear goes, I just want to make sure we're watching. Thank you.
Yeah, and actually going into the budget season, it may be that, that we really need to be very rigorous with what had previously, at least immediately after the flood, been a commitment to not just break even, but to actually have, my thought was always 15% return on revenue, but we never quite got that high. I think it goes against the grain of municipal budgeting, but in the situation we're in with the potential liabilities that the auditor indicated, we should be looking at considerably higher than we have in the past returns on revenue for each of the funds. And if we go into budgeting with that commitment, we need to come out of budgeting with that commitment as well. Because what has happened a couple of years, we went into it, talked about it like that, and then the final budget, somehow a bunch of those stuff snuck in, and we are where we were for this year. Which I don't think really personally was completely representative of the board's intent.
Okay.
And then I did have one more note in mind, that at one point we did talk about acquiring water shares, perhaps over a certain period of time. Is that something that we still need to consider doing? Maybe a water share a year, perhaps, planning an ordinance for future. So that was something that we had quite a lot of discussion about.
I don't know, did you miss the meeting where we had the presentation about our water portfolio, and they said that we are fine till well past build-out?
I either missed it or it's lost.
Okay.
In the fog.
And the rest,
Okay.
is that still, after you heard that presentation, is that still something you want us to consider, 50,000 set aside?
Well, it's not what I think we need to consider at this point, given that we now own, this bunch of butt rock water and so forth, is how we're going to use it most effectively. And are there ways actually of potentially raising revenue with it? What are all the opportunities presented to us by the amount of water that the town has in aggregate? And, are there applications that we could make within town? Or are there, I did note that people try to lease acre feet of water on a kind of an open market.
Yeah.
And so, there may be actual revenue opportunities for the town. But that, I agree with you, that was a pretty big reversal from thinking we had one watershed left to finding out that we actually had
Yeah.
more.
Because of the Button Rock. It's okay, it's okay. Trustee Roberts.
It just seems like excellent effort to be thinking about ways that we can utilize any resources that we have for some income. And we've talked a number of times about, could we sell the property at the top of Apple Valley, for example? Should we have discussions about other ways we can? I mean, I would have liked to have seen us have a much larger lodging fee than we passed, and we could revisit that. For example, what else can we make some money on?
Yeah, I think going into the time when we may be getting a call from either the state or FEMA, that is the time to start thinking about potential sale of the property at the end of Apple Valley.
Money in the bank.
Well, hopefully it's appreciating, maybe not a lot, but not declining.
Yeah, the way I view that is that's a capital asset that I don't know if it's technically in the water wastewater fund. It was a water plant at one time. I don't know how it's carried on the books, but we're talking about needing to do capital improvements, particularly in that area, and that is a capital improvement out there of a building and some land that's of no use to us. So it's an unused capital improvement. Can we convert that into some revenue that would go to some of the capital improvements we need? It seems like something we should consider.
And it costs us a little bit of money, or it should cost us a little bit of money for
Who
maintenance.
knows? Because of the floodplain aspects of that and the fact that it's in the county and all that kind of stuff, we might find if we listed it for sale that it's not worth very much, but it's something I think we should know. And even if it brings in a couple of offers, if we list it for sale and we decide they're not good enough, we don't sell it. We hold it for appreciation. But how do we know what it's worth unless we ever list it, which we haven't
Well,
done
it
in
appraised,
25
right?
years.
There's remediation costs nearly at
I know. So
$100,000,
you would think any buyer in the private market would take those into consideration in making their offer, and let's let them do that analysis instead of us hiring an appraiser to do it. I'd like to see what the private sector would
do with it.
tell us that property might be worth.
We have any other real estate? Isn't there property sort of east?
There's a whole list of properties that the town owns that we've talked about getting to. We looked at it years ago, and then the flood, and we held on to them, but that could be another priority for this coming year.
Trustee Carvis?
Or instead of getting the one-time gratification, the money in the bank, and I always tease us, he and I always banter back and forth on that piece of property up there. You can keep it and use it to generate power with it, and then sell the power to Longmont's. I think it's Longmont's got their power poles up there, and then you can generate income from it year to year to year to year. I do think the UEB has to find ways in the future with our contract with Mean to generate more power. I mean, we're talking years out, but sure hate to sell a piece of land that we have that we can generate power on, then have to buy it back 10, 15 years from now. And so there's two sides of the story there, Trustee Brown.
The other side is, where exactly are you getting the money to pay for those capital improvements that produce the power?
Well,
If it's power, there's grants.
that was in a study 10 years ago or so, and I wonder if we've got any idea what it would cost and what regulatory hurdles there may be. I don't disagree with you.
Right now, there's the grant
Because
out
it's
there
several
that we
items.
want to look
Yeah.
at, but I don't know
We're
if that's
almost-
a feasible place.
You can
It's
just
a
give me
whole
some
nother
dynamite,
workshop.
I'll blow a hole in the
Yeah.
basin, keep the building, and then at night cover it, we'll be fine.
Yeah, I think that the detailed discussion of this particular thing should be between UEB and,
That's a water plant.
yeah.
Yes.
So we have the concept on the table, and so the detailed discussion, I think we can delegate to the UEB.
So we have several more items, and this
Yeah.
doesn't need to be the only time we can visit this, but we do want to continue to move on. I'd like to throw out two things just that are on my radar administratively. That is to do another review of our fee schedule before we adopt the costs that, right now our fee schedule is supposed to be based on the amount of time it takes staff to process something, or again, our parking fees at Laverne Johnson Park. Seems to me that at least weekends, we might be able to do a little more. or incentivize people to use Bowen by having that be a little less than Laverne Johnson. There's some things there I think we can do, as you talked about. It's a good revenue generator since we've implemented that parking, but to be able to, for our out-of-town guests that might come for the whole day, $20 for a family of 5 or 6 all day is pretty good. If it went up to 10 on weekends or something.
Well, surely we'll get a lot more parking revenue in Bowen next year after the,
And, we thought
The
it would
ball
be this year
fields,
too,
yeah.
and it really, it's just barely picking up. But hopefully the ball field.
yeah, that's right.
Skateboarders probably aren't going to be driving, maybe, I don't know. Some will be from out of
Got
town.
those out of
Yeah.
towners coming in.
They'll be
early.
coming in. But I want to do that. And then I do want to take a look at our staffing, knowing that we are going to be, our contract with the state will be ending for some folks mid-year, and how do we adjust for that internally? As well as, we have not looked at the town's retirement plan for more than 10 years. So that is something else I want to look at administratively, make sure that's still as competitive as possible, since we still kind of are challenged with keeping up salaries with our immediate neighbors. But if we get some affordable housing here, that might change that.
Did they tell you it's like the Hotel California, once you're on?
I know. I know. So those are some things that I'll be keeping my eye on in the budget as well, from an operational perspective.
So we've talked a little bit about revenues and some various ways to increase revenues. How do you guys feel sales tax projections for next year should come in? What does your crystal
Our
ball
initial
say?
budget projections.
Yeah, we've enjoyed some real increases in sales tax over the last several years. The question is does the trajectory stay about the same, or is it leveling off a little bit? And that may take some analysis of what's happening in this year's trend, and what factors play into it, such as what will be the effect of changes in internet tax collection rules, the absence of some businesses from Main Street, as we can all see with some doors closed. What may be happening with the national park? Do we think that's going to remain relatively static, or will there be changes in the entry fee and changes in the volume? I don't know. This year seems, just by how long it takes me to get out of my neighborhood, that the park must be doing really well. But I think there are some factors to look at, particularly related to sales tax. And I think we have pretty good information on what we expect relative to property tax. It does seem that while in the last couple of years, and I suspect it will carry over into 2020 because of the lag in the way property taxes are assessed, but there does seem to be a little bit of leveling off in the inflation in property values. So we may need to look at all of those, which may tell us how much pressure there is on the need to raise revenues from other sources. At least that's my perspective. There may be some others.
As we did last year, I think you really need the end of summer numbers before you can do a projection, as our sales tax collections are so seasonal that we need to see how we look at the end of this summer compared to the last couple of summers. And so that, by late September or something like that, I think we'll have a better idea. My impression is that traffic to the national park and everything is way up, like you say, but how that's going to project into local sales tax numbers, I really think we need the figures really through August to kind of make an educated. That's what we did last year. Like early October, we sat down and looked at the numbers through August and compared carefully to prior numbers, and that's where we got the numbers from.
Okay.
So we got about
Yeah.
2/3 of the picture right now.
I think a tool that I think actually worked pretty well was, I think you referenced it, Joe, that taking a couple of years averages and then see what's the percentage of the total that comes in what month, and just helps to understand the seasonality.
Right. Okay.
Administrator Simons, you've indicated generally a number of times, if I recall correctly, that you felt that we have enjoyed significant increase in sales tax revenue just due to rebuilding, construction, perhaps sales tax on materials that are delivered for, and so it seems like there's a significant unknown about just the future of that component of, and so do you have any?
Well, as we get closer and closer to build out, I think we're going to see trends now of what we saw this past year, which was people buying lots and making significant upgrades to existing homes. We haven't seen a lot of take it out completely and rebuild, but I am seeing some very small homes become pretty significant structures. I think some of that timing will depend on Summit, so we'll still have all of their sales tax revenue for their building materials in 2020, so that will be a big boost, as well as if Mr. Tamburello purchases the Eastern Corridor. I think it would probably be late 2020, maybe 2021, which could actually be good if we have the one development in 2020 and the other in 2021. That would be good from the building perspective of revenue and material sales. In town, I think, we have a couple people talking about adding a third story. We have, the school district won't be paying, but if they do their auditorium project, they don't pay, no, not even
don't
on
pay
building
sales tax.
materials, not building materials. I didn't know if there was an exception for materials. So I think for 2020, from that perspective, we'll still be okay. But if we could get some folks moved into town, and I think what some of our local realtors, our retailers have said is people that are compromised with transportation are some of their best customers. And so it is very possible that if we can build out all 40 of those units, that could have a fairly significant, keeping some of our retail that we might be losing due to other factors, add some extra boost to their sales tax numbers. And then the marijuana thing is another whole factor here.
Actually going to bring that up. What's going on?
Right now, we're only generating revenue from one retailer, so we do fully anticipate the group called Red Lion. I don't know if they're going to be doing business as Red Lion, but the business that just bought the property next to Spirit Hounds is planning to move forward with building a new business. So that should be reopening, I would think, by the end of the year, first of next year. Lion's Finest, my understanding is there has been a application for a change of ownership. However, it is currently denied because they are on, what was the term they used? What was it? No. Oh, they have a special hearing coming up for the current owners. And so unless you're in good standing, they can't change ownership. They can't sell it. At the state level.
At the corner of Stone Canyon and.
Yes. So depending on what happens with that situation, if it does change ownership, that owner has made it very clear to us he plans to do some significant upgrades to the facility. So, and we still have one grow application that no one has ever applied for. So I think that market is kind of leveling out a bit, but a matter of time before it shifts. Maybe hemp will pick up or something else.
Yeah, one of the things that is different is that Longmont now has
Very much so.
multiple
Dispensaries,
facilities. And so people who drive in from places like, I don't know, Nebraska, who came along 66 to here, and seriously, you would see a lot of out-of-state license
Sure.
plates in the parking lot. But now that they have to pass a couple of other dispensaries that may, I think we need to understand what impact that's
I
having.
think it
or
will
not
have an
having.
impact on us. I think we've seen that impact. Yeah, there needs to be maybe some creative advertising, last stop before, because before you go up the mountain. So,
Is it still the case that we need to get to 3 dispensaries before we can get broken out reporting? That used to be
Yes, we need
on
all
our
3
marijuana sales taxes.
operating.
So if we ever get to 3, we can get detailed reporting on our marijuana taxes.
More detailed, yes.
Is that,
Yes.
that used to be the case, okay.
Right.
Or we can actually split it apart
Right.
from our
But
regular.
the finance director can do analysis.
We
and
can do
And
it
say things
inside.
like the trend is up or not up and that sort of thing,
Yeah.
which I think we.
It's hard to say right now if it's leveled out or even declined. Is that attributable to their being down to one shop? Or is it?
Is it due to Longmont
Or is
taking
it due to
the
Longmont or a
business? Yeah.
combination? It's hard to, I don't think until at least we get a second shop open can we even kind of make a guesstimate. It's hard to say right now. I do know is dealing with the Bud Depot folks because they were one of our sponsors for the Lions Golf Club tournament today. They are having a booming summer because they're the only one in town and they're the closest one to Estes Park.
Oh,
And
for all the festivals.
they're having a very good summer.
So speaking of, we kind of skipped over one of the questions, and that was, are there specific programs that we definitely want to continue, some we want to reevaluate, or special events? So I'm talking about, do we want to continue to, I will be bringing forward Lions Outdoor Games, or it may come forward as Burning Can, I don't know which way it's going to come forward yet, but are there certain events you want us to go out and try to get? Do we want to look for some, what they kind of call canned events, where they do everything, they're just renting our facilities? It's not as much, it's not staff intensive. Are there programs we want to really change up? I mean, good old days, every year that one is always brought up, but this year we made some changes and it still was pretty successful. So thoughts on specific programs?
When do we anticipate that Bone Park will be rentable? Oh, sorry.
I'm just messing.
Sorry.
Director Cosgrove told me today that he said we will be ready to use the fields in the spring.
Makes me so. We used to have diva dashes and that sort of thing pre-flood. So as of next year, during the 2020 fiscal year, we would have the possibility of doing that again because we really haven't for 5 years.
No, it appears that our fields should be able to have, competitive play if that's what we want to do.
Yeah.
And the events, if they can get sodded here in the next, 6 weeks, they'll have a nice fall to get deep roots and be good in the spring.
This kind of goes to Trustee Karavas's continuing point about how much does it cost to maintain and fields and that type of thing. If there are ever projections on revenue from softball tournaments, baseball tournaments, whatever, at the 2 unlit fields that we're going to have, I have a lot to say about that. I spent 15 to 20 years in the softball business on directors of the local groups and umpiring, coaching, and
Yeah, we had
parenting and all
those
that
numbers
stuff. And
pre-flood. We need to
what
update.
everybody needs to remember about that, the events I was talking about were things like diva dashes where people pay an amount of rent for a big event, is in this area, you've got within 20 miles, you have 4 or 5 different lighted softball complexes with 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 fields. You're not going to attract large amounts of tournaments to 2 unlit fields in Lions. It's just not going to. You're going to have a few little one-day 4-team things, but you're not going to see big revenue from that. It's not really a source of revenue. And to Trustee Karavas's point, from having done a lot of softball field maintenance, you will spend, if our staff does it, you will spend at least as much on maintaining those fields and the parking areas as you'll get in revenue from little bitty tiny invitational softball events.
Trustee Caravas.
I forgot part of the, what was the full, I forgot part of the question, but what we want to continue with along with what Trustee Brown was saying, with the different events we have, we will be able to add use of those fields. So hopefully we can do other things. And our fields aren't going to be big draws for major tournaments. Some of the small towns where my boys played Legion ball and things in the Midwest, or the small towns that didn't have the lighted fields, a lot of draw was, due to our generations, wood bat tournaments, where it's only wood bats, because everybody's now is aluminum, metal, whatever the composite is these days. I've been out of that for quite a while. Well, the skate park will be available for competition and special stuff during some of our events. So I'd like to see us continue our trend now 1 or 2 years, so hopefully grow the events on the current ones. And then the last couple of years, the previous board, pretty much right off the bat, started with staff, and then the board members just making feelers out, looking for these the shoulder seasons, the April, May, the September, October. And we tried with one, and staff was a little overwhelmed. It's still busy. I don't know where we're at with stuff, but I don't know. Staff is, they can even, go grab a beer after work on Fridays and brainstorm what's out there that we can bring. It doesn't have to be massive, small, that brings something to our town. Because this board, the previous board, and this board has said, shoulder season is what we want to really would help our businesses quite a bit. And if we continue to try, we haven't done it, we haven't found it yet. We've tried a couple, and I think we're still working on one possibly. I can't remember if we've completed this or not.
We more bike events and running events for fall.
Okay, yeah.
And then we did the winter fest.
Yeah,
the
yeah.
last couple of years. And
So I personally would like to see
decide
us.
how we wanna do the holiday parade. Do we want to start attracting people to that, or do we want to keep that more local?
Trustee Pearl?
So going back to what I brought up earlier about the conservation fund, that if we do need to spend that, I would like to see lights on the ball fields so that we can start thinking about ways of making revenue, even if it's small events around ideas that you're talking about, so that that can also be included. And it would be very interesting if we could have that completed before, because we have one more contract year with outdoor games. And it'd be kind of curious to compare, because we've all been on the kind of the fence on this one, would that make a difference next year? And the skate park being open. And so I would like to, that would be something that I would like to really push for, is that we get lights on those ball fields, especially if we've got this earmarked money that we do need to spend. And if that's really the case, let's get that done. So.
Okay, so we're running out of time, and so two things. One is, are there any other questions that need to be considered, important questions that we need to consider we haven't yet? And number two, are there any items that anyone on the board has waiting that they want to make sure get expressed before we run out of time?
So I have one important question. So I've heard back from several of the trustees about the meeting that we have on October 12th. It's a Saturday. And I know Trustee Miller wouldn't be able to be there for half the day. Trustee Roberts wouldn't be able to be there. So is there another day that works for everybody? Now that I have you all together, we can hopefully get a day that works for everyone.
Well, another day would be okay, because the 12th is my birthday.
You don't want to spend that with us.
That just means you're bringing cake and drinks.
All right?
But it needs to be around that same time frame to keep us on schedule.
I'm wondering if we could do that through a doodle or some other process to, that individuals could look at their calendars at home, talk to their family and so forth, and then respond that way. Would that?
That would be totally fine. Did we want to have a couple of days that people can look at, or?
Yeah, the doodle, you can
Okay.
put like 2 weeks worth, and people can check the days they can and can't.
Fantastic. We'll
All right.
I was just going to say, I know we were considering obviously a Saturday. Sundays are not off the table for me if that's becomes a necessity.
Same for me, yeah.
Okay.
Okay, Trustee Roberts, you got it.
I didn't want to interrupt, but I did have a question. Your Trustee Farrell, you requesting or mentioned lights and money in the conservation fund. And correct me if I'm wrong, I guess I understood from our meeting that the conservation fund, we're talking about spending it on already known non-reimbursable flood recovery expenses, as we would hope to do ongoing. As we build that fund, we also need to spend it. But specifically, am I understanding that correctly? That's the intent, is even though we need to spend it, we need to spend it on already identified disaster recovery expenses.
No, it's more for Parks and Recreation, as I understand it.
So,
I think it's a mixture of those two things.
yes.
Go
So
ahead.
actually what we had talked about at our meeting is, it was the impression of Trustee Farrell that we could, if one of the park expenses got denied through FEMA, we could go back and put it through Conservation Trust. But we did the expense years ago. So the money is available each year, and we report to the fund each year. So the expenses would have to be current in the year, and then we could do that, as long as they are recreation related. So recreation, parks, trails, anything like that.
Okay. And then I wonder if that's playing with fire, talking about lighting those ball fields.
Well, it could be part of the CIP overall discussion to me. I mean, it's a separate CIP, I guess, because it has protected funds. But I think the overall discussion, priorities, and, where does it fit?
Okay.
Other questions that we need to address before we wrap up?
So just kind of, we'd like to just, what's next, so you guys can prep budget-wise.
So actually, I sent out a bunch of different things to go on your calendars for kind of place marks. Our budget calendar is actually something I sent to you guys. The next thing we're looking for is for all of the budget requests to come back in to the finance office by for the department heads, it's the 16th of August. For the boards and commissions, it's going to be in it's going to be the end of August, August 20th. Is that right? Nope, it's September, sorry.
And a notice is going out to all the chairs of the commissions?
I haven't sent those out. Would you like me to do that? Or with you guys as the liaison to the commissions, would you guys like to do that?
Well, actually, I think both, sometimes it takes three things to, make sure the
Okay.
message gets across. So I think
Absolutely.
each of us should be talking with our boards or commissions, but a notice going out directly to the chairs is also helpful, I think.
Okay? We will take care of that. So yes, the date for the budgets to come back from boards and commissions is September 13th.
Okay, good.
Okay?
Okay.
September 13th, bring back your items from your boards and commission discussion.
Okay.
Okay?
So let's wrap up the workshop then, and we'll take a couple minutes break and be back to the regular session at 7 o'clock.
Great. Thank you.
I'm going to turn on the air for a few minutes.